Podcasters Roundtable, round 77, podcast workflow. Is your workflow fast? How does it look start to finish? Does it take forever? Does it get in your way of actually producing an episode on time? We're going to talk about that. And I think Dave's got some good mistakes to share, hopefully. And Prescott, I believe maybe his podcast is even based on this whole concept, probably why he's on the roundtable. But let's meet the roundtablers and start off with co-host Daniel. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity Podcast. I love talking workflow stuff and improving workflows.
Well, perfect then. You're the right person for the job. And Dave Jackson, Mr. Workflow Management Disaster. No, I don't know if that's true. Welcome back.
I did have a couple little mess ups. We'll talk about those. But yeah, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. Not afraid to try things. And sometimes when you do, well, yeah, that happens.
I like it. Fail fast. Is that what they say?
Yeah.
All right. And our new roundtabler, Prescott, welcome to your first round.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we could work out the schedule, and I'm really hoping to drop some knowledge and gain some as well on the topic of workflows.
Definitely. So your podcasts, what's your podcast?
Yes, I should have said that. It is The Busy Creator, and this is a discussion show about tools, techniques, and habits for creative productivity. So it is a creative and nerdy show.
Very cool. It's perfect for this audience. They're pretty nerdy. If you're listening to a podcast or watching a podcast about podcasting, you qualify. That's your target audience. So, and people who are interested in making their podcast better. So that's exactly what we want to talk to. In fact, I have one of your recent blog posts still in my tab. I have basically a personal browser, which would be Safari, but no reason these are divided out this way. Chrome, which does a little bit of other personal stuff, and then Firefox is what I use during the day during work. And I have you have a cool thing for how to put in a subscribe, almost a pop-up. I would say it's different than a pop-up little thing for mobile. So someone comes to your podcast page, and at the top, it's not like a pop-up that gets in your way. It just sits at the top, and you can make this have people just press a button to subscribe to your podcast. So I've been meaning to implement that at work, but if you're listening to this show, you're interested in that, so check out thebusycreator.com and look for that for Prescott, because it's really cool.
Hang on, let me get you the short link. That is actually, technically, it's called a quick subscribe banner, and it's an iOS native feature.
Yeah.
And so it's not shady and nefarious. Let me see what the redirect is. Come back to me in just a second.
Yeah, Daniel or Dave, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen this? Have you used this?
It's actually on my roadmap to create for my subscribe and follow WordPress plugin, but it is something that triggers a code inside of iOS. It was originally designed for app developers, so when you land on the app website, it pops up a banner to say install this app, or if you already have the app installed, it says open instead of install. And you can actually use that with other things inside the iTunes store, including podcasts.
Yeah, it's very cool. I tried it out. I think I went to Prescott. I think I went to your site to check it out. Of course, I knew you'd have it on there, and it's awesome. I mean, since still the majority of podcasts consume on mobile or iOS, and it works on iOS, then it's not intrusive, like I said, like a pop. It just sort of sits at the top. I think, does it even push your website down so it's not even blocking content? A banner,
right? Yeah,
and it's just you could click to subscribe, or you could just get it out of there. It's very cool.
Yeah, and it turns out I didn't have a redirect. I think Rob Walsh made one, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So I made one, and it's busycreator.com/banner.
Perfect. Check that out. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So
awesome.
All right. Well, okay. The Busy Creator. Then, what is you kind of told us quickly, but how does it relate to podcast workflows? What do you do on your show that a podcaster could benefit from, or you're targeting or focusing on that niche?
Sure. Well, it's not just for podcasting, of course,
but for podcasters.
Yeah, definitely. Well, a lot of it is kind of philosophical, right? The whole idea about creating a system and constantly tweaking it and constantly experimenting and being systematic and respecting your future self. That's kind of a principle, right? A good habit to use. So those are broad reaching, but specifically I talk a lot about project management tools, and I recommend everybody use one, even if you're working by yourself on a project. So these are the tools like a Trello or a Basecamp. I use one called Freedcamp, and they just became a sponsor of my show full disclosure.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
Didn't I see a comment like the first person to say Trello gets punched in the face or something like that?
Yeah, that was me.
Dave, on this show, you actually will get punched in the face. That's an inside joke for Dave.
But yes.
Virtual punch.
Right.
Why'd you say that though? Because you just brought it up.
Maybe that was why then. But I was going to say, like, a lot of people stress about the tools, and they're so overwhelmed by all the different software, and every day you see websites like Product Hunt, which are talking about nothing but apps and all these like either things that pop up with anything with a red circle with a number in it. This is like the driving force in your anxiety. So the show, I try to say, like, hang on, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? What can we create as a workflow? So in my case, the podcast is interesting because I am sometimes developing 2 or 3 at a time. Like, I'll record in batches, and then I have this backlog, and I'm deciding which one goes in which order, first of all, but then also picking up and leaving off at different phases or different steps. And so that's important to have a checklist system, or to have a kind of regimen that you go through every time when producing your show.
Yeah. And Dave has this show that actually really stresses me out. It's called Weekly Web Tools. So I feel like I got to try something out new every week. No, I'm kidding. Dave, isn't that show is that supposed to be gone by now, or?
I've almost killed it a couple times, and every time my small audience goes, please don't kill it. And so I said, all right, here's my Patreon. And they're like, all right. So I'm like, all right. So it's going strong.
Very cool. So Dave, when I say podcast workflow, when we talk about what comes to mind, because obviously you have something that sticks in your mind as, ooh, I've messed that up before.
Well, for me, that goes everywhere from getting content, organizing content, recording content, publishing content. And so one of the things I did that messed things up is I found that when I'm typing my show notes, a lot of times I would come up with something, and I used to type up my show notes after I recorded it. So I'm listening back to the show, and I'm kind of making summaries of it.
I do that. Oh. I'm feeling this is bad. Show notes is my major workflow stop point. I just hate them. They jam up the works, and stuff doesn't get put out. So I think I'm about to learn something here.
So I used to make my show notes as I listened back to my podcast at 2x speed. And I kept coming up with stuff that I'm like, oh, I wish I should have said that in the podcast, but it's too late. It's, 12:30. It's time to go to bed, whatever it is. So I was like, but I am getting better ideas when I type my notes up first. So I started doing that. And same thing. I was a little more organized. I think the content's better. But the bad news is I then forgot to listen back to my show, because that's when I used to listen to it. So I was like, hey, it's done. It's great. And put it out. And I think the first time I had like a minute and a half of empty space at the end. And then my ending music came on. And then the other time, which was hilarious, because in that next episode, I then said, hey, I'm really sorry I made a mistake at the end. If you missed it, I fixed it. Thanks. You have a collector's item. And then in that episode, I did the exact same thing. Forgot to listen to the thing. I did look at it. I looked for empty spaces, but I didn't actually listen to it. And my outro music was playing over my intro music or something weird. So that was one of those things where it's like, wow, I'm really damaging my brand here. So now I definitely listen to my show, even if I've already recorded the show to get it through. But it was one of those things where I just changed one little thing. And the good news is the content was better. The bad news was the presentation was horrible because I kept messing it up.
Yeah. And so I always listen sort of one for one, right? Because I didn't learn what I thought I was going to learn, because I do check my episode and I can pick out the errors after they happen because of that. But this is also probably a bad time suck for me in terms of workflow, because I'm doing my notes afterwards, and I bet Daniel does his notes beforehand and then bases the podcast on that. I think that would be better for me, because it may actually get more episodes out. And I'm talking about different shows here, not this one. There are no notes. It's just a friendly chat between friends. But so doing my show notes, I already don't want to do it, and then I have to listen one for one. I guess I could listen at 2x and then make the notes. But I'm thinking you can get better content by structuring that all out in the beginning. So when it comes to workflow, Daniel, when it comes to preparing your podcast, I'm guessing your show notes are done ahead of time.
Yeah, that's part of my preparation. I decide on my topic, and as I'm preparing the information that I'll share, I'm writing the show notes. So I make my my main points are my headings. Then I go back and I fill it in with the information under it. I'll move things around as I'm doing it. It helps me practice the content as well as prepare those show notes ahead of time so I can present the content really well.
Is it hard not to read that content? Because we don't want to read our notes, right?
Well,
You read your show?
I write very similar to the way that I speak, and I speak very similar to the way that I write.
Daniel J. Lewis revealed.
So I've said this before. I do end up reading a lot of my podcast, or it sounds like I'm reading from my notes because the way I wrote my notes is almost the exact same way that I would say it, and the way that I would say it is almost the exact same way that I would write it. For me, that difference is very minimal. So there are times that I am reading almost verbatim, or I'm saying it and I'm hitting almost the exact same language from my notes, but it doesn't sound like it because I may go off tangent, I may change things, but I don't, when it's my own words, I don't really have as much of a reading voice.
Right. And so when it comes to workflow, I think I'm going to need to start doing that, by the way. I'll try not to read, but that's a good tip because I have heard, write the way you speak, right? Because then Dave's heard that before. And I think that is definitely help when it comes to, if you need to actually read some notes, if you have something highly technical, write it the way you would say it, or maybe say it out loud and then write it down that way. But yeah. What's the big log jam? For me, it is show notes when it comes to workflow. And this may be a way for me to adjust that, and doing it ahead of time, I think could be a potential solution to that log jam, or at least help relieve some of the pain of show notes. I pretty much should just hire somebody, but we don't have that kind of money here as a roundtable. But, Dave, or Prescott, since you have a show about this kind of stuff and it's a podcast, what, for you, even though you probably have it all figured out, no, I'm kidding. I know you don't. You're always learning and sharing that with your audience probably. What to you, either now or before, and you sort of conquered it, was just sort of that log jam for you when it came to podcast workflow in your own show?
Absolutely. Well, without a doubt, the most time-consuming single element is what I call the technical edit. And I am one of these clowns that actually edits his show. I recommend it for the end product, but yeah, when you're in it, it's tough because I could record a 45-minute conversation with someone, and I could spend 2 hours editing it, making it sound better, making it sound more natural.
So which parts are you editing? Are you actually moving around content, or is it taking out ums, ahs, and post-production? What are you actually doing?
It's mostly the latter. Occasionally, I'll sort of forget a question that was relevant earlier, and I'll just, I'll say to the guest, oh man, I forgot, and then record that segment, put it in, adding, like if we take a break to mention a sponsor or something like that, we can take an actual break and then stitch it up a little bit. So I'm not doing a lot of editorializing, I'm not doing a journalist style show, but
yet it still takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
most podcasters know, but some have learned to release themselves from the over edit. Right? There's a caution on the over edit.
Yeah, definitely. There's a balancing act about how much do you leave in just because that sounds natural the way it was spoken, and then other times you're like, hang on, these are straight up errors. People are stuttering, they're talking over each other, even to the point where they'll say, oh no, sorry, you go ahead, and it's like, take that out. That's 3 or 4 seconds. Just cut it out. No one will miss it. So that is the part that is the single most intense time. But it's also, here's the funny thing, and I don't know if I'm alone in this, that it's one of the few items in the whole workflow that I can't multitask, right? It takes my eyes and my ears and all parts of my brain to do it once. So I can't have some television show in the background. I can't be cooking and, composing tweets or whatever. And
isn't that ironic that the core part of producing a podcast can't be done while doing something else?
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
Which is one of the core value adds of podcasting. You're not going to mow your lawn and edit. I don't suggest that.
No, and it's tough to even do like on the train or something. People say, hey, you should just be editing like casually in the background. Like I really have to focus in.
It's tough.
I find anyway. But the end result is that I think it's a much better show. And occasionally when I'm listening back, like what I used to do, I'm going to borrow on Dave's topic, that I used to edit while I was taking the show notes. Or I would do them both simultaneously. So I would be essentially taking the show notes, but then if I caught something that was really dramatic, I would switch over and do the audio edits. But now what I've done, or what I do, is I will edit the main conversation, like I said, that 45-minute situation, and then export that just as a quick dirty MP3, and then listen back and take the show notes. Because at this point, I know what's happening in the conversation, so I can almost write ahead of myself. But at the same time, also, I can listen and be like, oh, this is actually a good conversation.
Speaking of workflow, I didn't address this up top, but this is probably going to be our lowest live attendance. This is the first time where I haven't been able to do a Google Plus event, and I talked about on round 76 that Google and Hangouts on Air has now gone to YouTube. Well, if you go to Google Plus, where are your circles? Where are all the people? So this is one of those situations where I was connected to a lot of people on the third-party platform. That third-party platform folded up shop. And I don't necessarily have a connection. We would draw, I'd send out an invite, and it would be to a few thousand people who circled me. And of those people who still get those notifications, we still would manage to get like 30 people to a live stream, which is a good number. It's a great number to me for previous live streams that I've done and live streams that I've seen. And now we don't have that. So podcastersroundtable.com/guest. Sign up to that list because I do send out the announcements. You will get the notification that we are going to be doing a round live at this time. It's usually Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, but that is always possible that can move around. So sad that I feel like we're rebuilding. That is part of a workflow. I mean, it was literally a major part of what I did. I created the event. I even created a custom banner for it, which is nice. I don't have to do that anymore. Yep. But it paid off. It brought in people, and now I'm seeing it's awesome. We got 9 people in the chat. What's up, Addie? I see her there. She's awesome. She put the link in the chat to your post there for the quick subscribe banner. Anyways, you want that, and so just thought I'd bring that up. This is a recent issue. I like to always talk about new things happening on this platform because we've used Google Hangouts on Air since the beginning. It's on YouTube Live. It's not dead, and you need to sign up the list so we don't lose you guys and girls. So we want you to tune in. Dave, when it comes to the edit, are you in the same place? Are you sitting down and editing for so many hours that it's kind of hurting your workflow? Or not hurting, but it's just a major piece?
It's just a major piece. And it is one of those things that I am finding that because I'm spending more time developing the content before I record it, I don't have to spend quite as much time editing it because I'm not doing as many tangents. I kind of know what I'm going to say. So it hasn't got it to the point where I don't have to edit because I still talk the way I talk, but it is not quite as hodgepodge as it used to be.
It hasn't saved you time because you've time shifted that from post to pre-production, but maybe a little sanity in that you're not figuring it out as much in post as opposed to getting it really nailed down before you hit record, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then for me, I'm on a PC. I use Sony SoundForge. I can listen at 1.78, even though I sound like a chipmunk. And really all I'm looking for are obvious things that, the and even those, I know some people will leave those in there, but if I'm somewhat of an machine at times. And the other thing I do, like on my Ask the Podcast Coach, that's a live show. And there are times that there are things that happen live that have, hey, congratulations if you were live, you got to hear the train wreck, but I'm not going to let that go out to the recorded version. So I'll cut out stuff where people try to come in and they can't, and it just technical snafus and things like that. So that's what I'm listening to on that show.
This is one of the beauties of this show is that it doesn't get edited. I do put it in the editor. I chop off the beginning where it's nothing, we're starting, and the end. And there's no music. I mean, there's nothing to do. Maybe had to cut something out once or twice because you don't need to leave that in. People need to listen to 2 minutes of you fixing the stream or something, but no edits. And the show notes they should be obviously a lot more in depth than they are. They're not, but the bottom line is the show gets out on a more regular basis than my other shows. So it happens. But Daniel, before I get to Daniel I am curious about your edit workflow. Prescott, how did you solve, or are you still working on this in your workflow, or does it not matter? Does this not play a role that you think you have to fix, or how does this go in terms of making your workflow efficient in this big sort of thing that is the edit?
Well, one step I have taken, and especially this past August when I was really busy, I had a project on site, so I was working like a conventional employee, so it was a little less flexible. I actually found someone to do that editing. And so I was paying him, of course, out of my own pocket. My show is not a huge commercial endeavor yet, but the effort that he put in was really a time saver and got me some peace of mind. So the money kind of evens out in that regard. But like I said, I'm also taking the how can I say this? Like trying to get that edited conversation finished early on in the life cycle of that show is very helpful to me, rather than doing it the same day that, or like the Sunday before I'm publishing, that type of thing. Because not only do I take the show notes from that, but then I'll also reach out to the guest and be like, oh my God, this is going to be great. You should tell. I'm genuinely learning what we talked about, and I also write the intro and outro based on that conversation. So if I can get that done and be happy with it, that helps the rest of the workflow.
Awesome. And Daniel, where does the edit sit in your workflow?
For me, the edit sits in someone else's lap.
Nice. So that's twice I've heard this. So who's willing to actually share with this, I would say, average podcaster audience, what something like that costs? The ballpark.
It really depends on the level of editing you want someone to do. And of course, the quality of what you're giving them.
Yeah.
Like what I do, I have John Buchanan editing my episodes. And I have passed on to him the workflow that I do myself. And that is that when I'm presenting, well, first of all, I try to focus on presenting things well. I try to make that decision. I try to teach myself to not do those things that I know would make for mistakes. But there are times that I make mistakes. Either I butcher the pronunciation of a very simple word, or I stumble over something, or whatever. What I'll do is I'll mark those locations where I know I made a mistake. You can do that in recording software if you're recording directly into your computer. You can do that with some audio recorders as well, like all the Tascam and Zoom recorders allow you to place markers, not the Roland recorder. But then with those markers placed, depending on the software you're using, you can see those markers. And I know that at that marker, there's some place where I made a mistake. You can do something similar manually by, clapping or leaving some silence, or you just write down the time code of an edit point. But so what I would do is then go to those points and edit what I knew needed to be edited, and then leave the rest to be mostly natural. So that reduces how much I need to edit, and also for my editor, that reduces how much he needs to edit. Now, editing, depending on how long your episodes are, a couple to a few $100s per month.
Per month? I mean,
yeah,
like a weekly episode. You're
right.
Thinking maybe once a week episode.
Yeah.
Right. Just ballpark. I'm just curious. I'm sure people, they're all right now wondering, if they're listening to the show on the archive, they can't say it in the chat, and they're like, is that even possible for me? So in reach for some people, and other people, you have to trade your time for money. And it's really, in my book, it's the same thing.
And that's the thing for me, where podcasting for me is a business. So especially for the audacity to podcast, that is how I grow my business. So what I realized is that my podcasting was preventing me from podcasting. My trying to grow my business was preventing me from growing my business. So for me, my time was worth it more to be able to pass it on to someone else so I could focus on the next big important thing, and then pay someone else because I knew, okay, I'm paying them this much per month, but the time I'm saving, I can easily make back that amount, or just not having that stress is also worth paying for.
Yeah, very cool.
I have nothing like your job.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Nothing like your job to get in the way of your work.
Yeah, and Prescott, check your email.
Awesome.
Okay.
You'll have an email from me.
I have on my desktop a screenshot, and it's actually titled Zoom H6 Track Marker. Like, I had to go in and really find this out for somebody, but you press the little scroll wheel on the side and you can make a mark, and that's what Daniel's talking about. And different devices do that differently, so check out yours if you can do that. What were you going to say, Daniel?
It's a little weird of a spot, and don't assume you can get those markers in Audacity or some other cheap software. If your recorder is the thing that made the marker, if you're recording into Audacity, you can place a marker while you're recording. But it's finding those little hacks that I think significantly improve the process. Or like you said with Dave, shifting where you spend your time. So yes, you may be spending the exact same amount of time, but you're spending it on something that doesn't kill you.
Yeah, I mean, that helps with the longevity of your show, right? If you're not miserable producing it, then you might actually stick around for a year or two. You know, I often say that the single worst person to be working on our shows, to edit, is ourselves, right? We're our own worst enemy. But I bet for a lot of people, it's super hard to pass off that sort of that task that you have so much control over of editing and letting someone else do it. Now, I for professionally for a living, I also edit some other shows that other people record, and I handle that. I don't change context. I just make it really nice in post-production. But, you know, how do you guys pass over that control? Daniel, I know you're very particular about your episodes, and it's very specific. And so that's essentially like, until a few months from now, your baby is your podcast episode. There'll be a real baby to worry about, and that's probably another reason to pass it on. But, you know, how do you handle that, passing that off?
It's tough because Chris Ducker calls it the superhero complex, where you feel like you can do everything better than everyone else, everything related to your tasks. And that may be absolutely true. You may be faster, you may be better, but you can't do everything for yourself. It's loading you down. So for me, it was showing the process. And then there's that point where you have to trust that the person is doing it well, and let go of some things. Stop micromanaging.
Yeah. But this brings us right back to Dave. I mean, Dave said experiment, right? I mean, like, it doesn't hurt to try it. And it may find out that, wow, okay, I'm okay with this. It works really well. And guess what? I feel a lot better, right? So try it. Podcasting is beautiful because you can try something new and just change it if it doesn't work.
Well, the other thing I did was my show comes out on Monday. So at like Sunday night, 11:45, I'm literally many times scrambling to finish things up, because I was recording them on Saturday and then I would edit them and publish them on Sunday. And I'm like, well, we need to fix that, because that's half the reason why I'm leaving typos that are just insane. And I'm like, we just need to take the pressure off. And I just moved everything back a day. So now I record on Friday, I edit and, basically publish on Saturday. And that way, if something happens, life throws me a curveball, I got an extra day of cushion to go, wait, hold on. We don't have to freak out now. We've got another 24 hours to get this right. And just make sure not to take that too far of an extreme to where you're like, oh, it's all right. It's all right. No, keep your sense of urgency, but it's just nice to have a little bit of cushion, because I was making a lot of silly mistakes because of a self-imposed deadline, which in the end, if it didn't come out, at midnight on Monday, it's not like somebody was going to, as we say, punch me in the face. So better to have it right than right now. So that's another lesson that I have a hard time, because I've had people say, Danny Payne says, hey, 9:00 on the West Coast, man, that's when your show comes out. And I'm like, so that's weird that I know people are waiting for it. Midnight my time is 9:00 his time. And I'm like, but on the other hand, Danny wants a right podcast, not just because it's on time.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I add something to Ray's point, too, about experimentation? That what I did recently was that not only did I do an experiment, and you kind of set aside the money, right? You say, like, hey, can I do a $60 experiment or whatever it is? Like, you have to acknowledge that up front. But then, like Daniel said, write a detailed brief, or really what you're hoping to get out of it, what you're expecting. And then when you get the file back, or when you get the edit back, like, talk about it with the person and be like, okay, this is 90% there. There's just 2 or 3 little moments, and ask him or her to listen back to the corrections that you made. You kind of create the feedback loop. And I was actually pleasantly surprised at how fast my editor, this guy named Dave Farrell, how he kind of got my groove. I gave him some examples as well. The audition files, not just the finished episodes. So definitely experiment and then iterate is the second part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And then I see in the chat you asked, can we mention Daniel's 6 Ps? Now, I don't know exactly what these are, but I've given a lot of podcasting talks, and like it's almost everything begins with a P, like produce,
except content,
publish content. So anyways, this would be good since Prescott brought it up. Prescott has to give us Daniel's 6 Ps. Okay. Does he just know it as a concept, or do you know what the 6 Ps are?
No, well, full respect here, Daniel. I totally borrowed this from an episode of your show and the blog post that matches it. And I created for every episode 6 phases, another P word, these phases. And from start to finish, your show is going to go through these phases, and you can sort of pick up and leave off at any time depending on what else is going on. And now I renamed them slightly. So these are, I guess, my deviation of Daniel's 6 Ps. So in this case, they are propose, plan, prepare, produce, publish, promote. Daniel, do you want to take over and say what the original is?
Plan, prepare, present, produce, publish, promote. Very close.
Yeah.
And then you got to add on repeat.
Yeah.
Repeat.
After repeat.
Just pronounce the P and repeat very strongly.
Rinse and repeat, man. That's podcasting at its core. Awesome. So, outside of the big chunk of producing a show, which is editing, and some people don't edit at all. I think that's how they deal with this workflow and get stuff out. And depending on how often you put out content, and how used to being on mic, not everyone can do that. If you're reading your show, it's easier, but I think the trade-off is not a show that sounds as good. Daniel's found a way to blend those two. But what's the other, when we're talking about workflow, where's the other pain point or somewhere where we can help podcasters? Is it the planning? Is it all how much research do you guys do? Let's talk about that in workflow. Like for me, I will say for the Podcaster Studio, there was a X amount of episodes, maybe up to 50, where it was very easy. Topic, go, because I've got that in my head. And then it hits a point when you get past 50 or 100 or maybe 20 episodes where you got to start digging for stuff and doing research, right? You only got so much in your head that you can put together a good show off the top of your head. So how much research is going into an episode, Prescott?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, usually what has happened in the past 2.5 years since I've been doing mine is that about 50% of the time I know the guest really well, and they're professional connections or even personal friends of mine. So I'm kind of like, hey man, when are we doing that show? And I don't really have to prepare too much. I always write questions, and sometimes we don't get to all the questions or all the talking points. But in some cases, I'll actually reach out to folks on the internet who are doing a topic that's relevant, I think, or I'll get pitched authors. They'll have their PR people like write to me and send me a book even. And so in that case, I'll actually read the entire book because I don't want to have them on my show if I don't know that it's a good fit. So, I mean, how long does it take me to read a book? That's easily 12 hours, right? Plus checking out their website, writing questions. But so the main answer, I think, is that with online research, looking at their social media, listening to their show if they have one, watching their videos, plus writing the questions, it's probably about 3 hours to sit down with a 45 to an hour conversation.
And that's huge. Dave, I mean, you have so many episodes. How much pre-production is going in?
Well, I'll give you an example, and you have to think things out. This weekend, I'm going to be in Philadelphia at Podcast Mid-Atlantic. I'm going to get back Sunday about 6 o'clock. So it's going to give me, roughly 6 hours to get an episode out. So I'm like, I need something I can work on anywhere. So a couple weeks ago, a lot of my show topics come from my audience. And so we started talking about jargon. And I went through and made a list and I asked my members of the School of Podcasting to chime in on all the things that people can get confused on. And I hate to do visual stuff in an audio podcast, but this is the glossary, and it just keeps going and going, but it's in Evernote. And I would say there's an easy 50, if not 60, pixels, RCA, XLR, mixer, RSS, bit rates, sample rates, pop filters. These are all things that we say. And so I'm making a glossary of podcast stuff, and I've been working on it basically in the evenings for about, a couple hours a night. And by the time it gets to Sunday, I'll probably have an easy 10 hours into this one document. And that's not normal for an episode. For me, it's usually a couple hours of interviewing somebody or, as Prescott said, I've got a book I'm reading now by Neil Patel that I'm hoping to get him on the show. But when I'm not eating or sleeping, I'm doing something that's going to end up on a podcast somewhere.
And that's part of the key of, you better love what you're talking about, because when you're that far down the line, that many episodes deep, I hope it's stuff that you're spending your spare time on. That's how the research gets done. You're like, I was already... for me, I spend a lot of time looking at video cameras, so I really should be doing a video camera podcast at this point. But, otherwise it's going to be really taxing effort to then put your hobby aside and then go do the research for your show. Hopefully that is the same thing. Ralph Rivera in the chat, he said he's considering Hindenburg for editing. He hears it can save time. Curious of your thoughts. Dave, you've used Hindenburg. Does it save time in the edit?
It's great if you're doing story stuff. I'll give you an example. I use Hindenburg exclusively on The Messengers. I don't get paid for that. The Messengers is a podcast about this documentary that is going on. And I'll bring in a conversation and I'll hear sound bites is what I'm dealing with. So what's great is I can go in and, like you do with many programs, and splice things in pieces, but I can then drag this soundbite to a sidebar in Hindenburg, get rid of the stuff I don't want, and then drag those little parts back out and assemble them. That's if you're doing any kind of NPR style with sound bites, I could do that in Audacity. I could do it in, Audition, things like that. This just makes it so easy. So that's, to me, when I do this kind of show, this is the tool I pull out. It's really pretty cool.
Yeah, Dan Powers says it's a game changer in his workflow. It's so much easier to get the product out. He loves it. So, I mean, you can check out Hindenburg Journalist is what it's called. There's different levels of it, and it's something I've been wanting to use more of. And it's an editor that I recommend to someone who doesn't want to pay the subscription price of like Adobe Audition, which is tough now, or you don't have Logic, but it's very tailored to podcasting. So check it out. I think it's one of my favorite editors that I don't use.
You can get a 30-day trial. Yeah. The only thing, there's a little thing where it will automatically adjust the volume level when you bring in a file. That's the overall volume level. So if you have part of your file that's really quiet and the end is really loud, it's going to give you the overall stuff. And I've found that at times what I will do is run something through Alphonic and then bring it into Hindenburg.
Right, good tip there. Yeah, Dan he says great for live to tape. So, and I know you can integrate with Skype in the pro level version and actually record Skype convos through there, which is something a lot of podcasters do. Prescott, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was actually going to ask, I guess to all of you, do you use templates or starting documents, as they're fashionably called now in the world of graphic design at least, that to have a starting document not just for the audio files, but also for the show notes and even for the folder structure, just to organize things? I'm interested to hear about that.
For me, it may be one of the small points where I'm actually that's a small point of organization in my workflow. I always have templates for video edits, for anything that's recurring. And with Audition, I've got a template that's got, all the effects I'm going to use. It's got bumper music, transitions, all the stuff that may happen in one episode. It's all in there, right?
Yeah.
And that's about it. I'm not very organized. Daniel, I'm sure that you've gone beyond that.
Yeah, it's funny we bring this up because just today I created a video for Podcasters Society about setting up templates inside of Audition. But a couple of the templates I use that I really like that make show notes easier or the WordPress posts easier, 2 plugins. One is Simple Content Templates. It's free. And the other is what I was using is Shortcode Exec PHP, which is no longer officially supported. So there's some other shortcode plugin. I can't remember the name of it. But what Simple Content Templates allows you to do is create a starter post for WordPress so that whenever you go to create a new post or a page or other pieces of content, before you write anything, you can choose a template, and then your template can have your sections, your images, any formatting, and some metadata in the premium version of the plugin already filled in. So then all you need to do is remove what you don't need or add your text into the appropriate spots. Yeah. The other thing is shortcodes, making my own shortcodes so that, like, I have a show notes close shortcode so that in WordPress, a shortcode will automatically expand out on publish to display all kinds of other stuff. So that's what I use for my closing thing where I say, contact me here, follow me here, subscribe to the other podcasts, here's my affiliate disclaimer, that kind of thing. So then whenever I update that shortcode, it retroactively updates all the past posts. But if I update only the content template, it goes into effect only for new posts that I create.
Yeah, and that's the key there because I do the lazy man version of that. It's called copy paste and remove what I don't need. But there was the key to workflow and being efficient and the best use is that Daniel just mentioned, when he changes, he can change everything retroactively, right? You can change every back post, so that that statement of affiliate or whatever you need can be updated throughout your back catalog. You can't do that with copy and paste without sitting there for a year doing it. So that is a good tip. That's a better way to do that. I actually have one of those plugins on my WordPress, so maybe I'll start using it. But yeah. Francisco, go ahead, Prescott.
And what I did with my quote template for Audition is when I open up the School of Podcasting, I have my intro music and my outro music. And after leaving, I later, when my ending was way down to the right, I brought in my outro music again, forgetting it was already in here. So now I have both those set up to be muted, so that now I don't accidentally leave that. I turn them on, things like that. And then for me, I have my file structure is every podcast I do has a folder. And then in there is a folder called episodes, which inside there has episode 1, 2, 3, etc. And then I have a folder called finished. So where everything, the finished product is. So the episode folder may have all the WAV files. The finished folder has the finished MP3. I have another folder called production elements. So that's your intro, outro, your album artwork. So in the event you're traveling to Pennsylvania and you want to work on the road, I grab that folder and I've got everything I need now to create a podcast on the fly. And then for me, if I have segments like I have because of my podcast in the last 5 and 5, I have that folder, one that is played and unplayed. So when I get a new one, I'll put it in there and then drag and drop it. And that's just something I started doing about 200 episodes ago that I wish I would have started doing since the very beginning, because when I do videos, you can see that the School of Podcasting folder is just a mess, but everything else is nice and neat, all my other ones. But that's what happens when you've been doing it a while. And I didn't feel like cleaning it up, but it's much cleaner than it used to be.
Yeah, that thing about templates, it's for me, all the templates and assets, it's in Dropbox, because if I don't have to be at my computer, I can just take it from the cloud. So that's another good thing. I can be on the road, grab everything I would need except for the content I'm going to record, and it sits in the cloud. So that's also another good tip, I think.
Yeah, I do the same thing. My podcast is in Google Drive, and but same philosophy, right? That it's on my laptop, it's just syncing in the background. So if I'm traveling, I know that as soon as I hit save, when I get to another Wi-Fi connection, it's going to go up to Google Drive, and then when I come back to my desktop system, it'll just be there. And that's a great tool to use, any cloud computing or cloud saving function like that.
Yeah, especially if you have co-hosts. I know on Ask the Podcast Coach, Jim and I have a shared Google Doc, so he can see the questions that I plan on covering each week.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Francisco Ruiz, I hope I'm saying that right. He says Ripple edits saved him so much time when editing his podcast. So we're going backwards a little bit, but it's a tip I wanted to say. Like, learn your shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, and you can customize this in your editor. I mean, like, I set up Audition. One of the main pain points for me switching from Soundtrack Pro, which I still love, to Adobe Audition was it didn't quite do things the way I knew they could be done as fast. So in editing. So I always tell people watching me edit a podcast is like watching someone play a piano, because the fingers never stop and just gliding across the keyboard. And in fact, to the point where where I set up the shortcuts, for me, like a Shift Command X is going to be this Ripple Delete, which is, just cuts it and puts it back together. That's going to happen while the playhead is moving. I can not even stop the playhead, and that helps. So getting familiar with your editing system, whatever you use, and setting up shortcuts or using the shortcuts they already have is a huge thing for me when it comes to workflow.
One of the things I love for productivity, for improving my workflow and all kinds of things, and Randy Cantrell mentioned this was something that initially was one of the things that convinced me to switch to Mac, because the best tool I knew of at that time was available on Mac. Text expansion. This is where you type a few characters, whatever it may be, or symbols or something, and it's automatically expanded or replaced with something else. So for example, I can type tap.url and it inserts http:// all of that for the Audacity to Podcast. But you can do even more advanced stuff with that if you learn how to use the tool. Like you can make it pop up something to ask you to fill in content. So maybe I have tap.url, well, that is one of them. It pops up and asks me to fill in what comes after the slash. So that way, in some of those apps that automatically replace or embed a URL as soon as it's pasted in, I can override that with whatever long URL I have. But there are even cooler things you can do with it. It gets super geeky, but I've used AppleScript with Text Expander, that if you're on my Podcasting Deals newsletter, where I send out a deal as soon as I find it, most of the unique information in each email is automatically populated through Text Expander. Like, I'll copy an Amazon URL, I type one code, and it automatically puts the name of the product and the price. I type another code, it pulls in the image. I type in another code, it makes my affiliate link, and that kind of stuff. Really cool things you can do with text expansion, available Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, Android. There are tools all over the place for it.
Yeah, Barbara C. Phillips. I include the C because I know that's important when someone puts it there, like a J. But Barbara C. Phillips in the chat on YouTube. So there's podcastersroundtable.com/live. That's where the main chat room is. If you're watching, go there for any of the rounds, podcastersroundtable.com/live. But this is broadcast to YouTube at the same time. So we will be keeping up with the chat there. And some people are chatting there. So we will pick you up wherever you are. And she says she loves Text Expander. She says on a PC, or maybe I guess a Windows machine, short keys is the same. So lots of options for this, and Dave apparently likes short keys.
I love short keys.
There's also Phrase Express on Windows.
So lots of things. Yeah. I'll try to remember to put some of those in the show notes. I think Francisco also asked, does anyone enlist their show's fans to help manage a social media channel? I would even expand that to enlist your fans to help you at any part of the workflow. Anyone done that? I know that there are shows that say, hey, our fans do X, Y, and Z for the show.
I have two people on Monday morning email me the typos that I missed. Now, like, I'm doing better at that, but it's like I had one this week. They're like, hey, man, almost. I had one, but they're both they just know it bugs me. And as much as I try to read it out loud and read it backwards, it's hard to proof your own stuff. And so they're like, would you? And they're all like, I don't want to make you feel bad. I'm like, no, I feel bad when I found out that it was there for 6 months.
Right.
So. If you watch Pardon the Interruption, which is an ESPN show and a podcast, PTI is one of the biggest podcasts apparently, but they have at the very end of the show, they have corrections. So this guy, Tony Reale, I think is his name, he does like real-time fact checking on what they say, and they score them at the end. They're like, actually, and then they turn the camera to him, and they're like, you got X wrong, and Tony got this wrong, and the other guy got this wrong. So, don't be shy. Let us know what we got wrong. We can take it. We're content creators on the internet. If the comment doesn't say, you suck, start another show, it's helpful. Constructive criticism is something that every podcaster, I think, needs to learn how to take and should solicit. Yeah. Definitely don't want a typo on my stuff.
I ask folks to tag me in an article, like on Twitter or something, if they just have an interesting article or a resource, just to make me aware of it. And then I will, in turn, put that out in a Friday link pack blog post or mention it when it's relevant, or just give it a try and contribute to a knowledge base. But that's really the only thing where fans are participating.
Some people have their fans help them create content. I know Dan Benjamin for the podcast method, he has people hashtag stuff, basically the questions, and it's where he's going to pull questions for that show. Now, I don't know, that show's very regular, so I don't know how much that really works, having your audience always give you all the questions. My original show, the Podcaster Studio, started, episode 1, was a live show. Hello, I had no audience. First mistake. And answering questions of people who had podcast questions. Well, when you have no audience, it's hard to get questions. So maybe something to consider when you go out trying to get questions. Getting feedback on a show it's a high threshold activity. It's hard to get feedback. So anything else? Anyone else? Daniel, do you have? I mean, you hire an editor. Do your fans? What the Once Upon a Time is popular. That seems like probably an engaged audience that probably does something.
Yeah, for Once Podcast, I needed a forum moderator.
Or has it always been Once Podcast?
It's always been Once Podcast.
My mistake.
The name has always been officially Once Upon a Time Podcast. All right. But for short, Once Podcast. For that, when we started the forum on the website, it got very active, and I knew I couldn't scale personally. So I looked at who is the most active person, and I put the word out to say, we're looking for a forum moderator, and someone who is extremely active jumped in. Same thing with sorting feedback, because we get a lot of feedback for that podcast. So I looked at who knows what good feedback looks like because they've sent good feedback themselves and would be available to do this. So I have all of the feedback emails forwarded to them. They help sort it. And this is stuff where either I pegged someone specifically. I went to them and said, hey, you seem really good at this. Would you be willing to help us? Or I put out the word to say, we need someone who can help us with such and such. Is anyone willing to do that for us? And the response has been great. Some people I do pay because of their profession and the amount of work I'm requiring them to do. Others, I do it and get a mention. Every now and then we can give them some kind of perk or something.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning too, Jennifer Briney, who does the Congressional Dish podcast, and she always mentions on almost every episode that the folks who participate in her show started as fans, and they started giving her album artwork for topic-specific shows and started maybe even editing. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but she's had a very active fan base to give back to the show, if not in money, then in kind, in services, which is pretty cool. And also Keith and the Girl, who I know here in New York, have pretty much credited their whole kind of popularity on their audience. And they say, hey, go out and send stickers and go out and tell people about it and grab other people's phones and sign up for it and like that type of thing, kind of almost guerrilla marketing. But the fans are happy to do that, so to outsource the promotion to your fans, I think is a real hack.
When I was doing the Musicians Cooler podcast, I had a Word document that I turned into a PDF that had your typical, free music marketing tips. And at the end, you could tear off instead of a phone number, which you normally see, was the website address. And I told my audience, go hang this up in Guitar Center, have somebody take a picture of you with it. And then before you leave, tear off one of the tabs so it looks like it's got importance to it. And then they were put into a drawing to win my book. And that was something that was just fun. And I had all these pictures of people at guitar centers or different music shops and things like that. So anytime you can outsource that, because these are people who want to help. They love the show and they want to see it grow. And get them involved. Keith and the Girl were great at the beginning. They had people out spray painting on the street their logo, and they kind of found out that was frowned upon by the city.
Nice. I have some Roundtable stickers. I just need to get them out there more. People, the funny part is there's a part of, you make a sticker about your show and you feel, okay, here, take the sticker. And then someone, you're like, you don't have to actually stick it on anything. But then people do. And you're like, and then they've shown it on the show like a year later. It's still stuck to something. You're like, thank you so much. Like, you can peel it off if you want. Like, you don't have to get there. But people, right. They do. They love the show. Look at Daniel. Look at that. It's a sticker over his logo. We supplanted the Apple logo on Daniel's computer. It's probably more of a copyright thing, but we appreciate it.
I was looking for my iPad. That's where mine is.
See? You guys
I have it on a notebook. Yeah.
I got to pass those out. Wait, you have a Roundtable sticker?
Yeah, I think I got it at Podcast Movement or something.
Dude, that's a rare thing to have. That's amazing. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not been able to hand out very many of those. I always find I get home, it's like business cards. I get home, they're just in my pocket. I was like, you know what? I didn't do a good enough job of getting these out. All right, so we got a little more time here, but yeah.
Are we going to tackle social media and promotion? Because that seems like the big one.
Is that
frankly,
a big one?
I'm interested to hear if people are good at this and kind of got the workflow zen going on.
So what's the pain point there for you when it comes to workflow? So you've planned it, you got it. You recorded it, you got it. You post process, got it. Now you got to promote it, right? Who here thinks you need to promote your podcast in the first place?
Oh yeah.
Well, everyone, yeah.
I don't know if everyone. You mentioned crowdsource stuff, and Rob Walsh. He has people send his artwork, and Rob Walsh he's all about making content, not promoting content. And I'm sure I have heard him say, he understands. I think Elsie has beat him into submission with you got to have some promotion. But, some people would say, hey, focus that energy back into the content.
Promotion can also be equipping your audience to promote you. You're turning them into an ambassador.
You're saying through the show's content or after the show is sort of released?
Well, it could be any of those. Turning your audience into ambassadors in some way. Maybe it's asking them to share the episode. Maybe it's getting them involved in a way that they get so excited about the podcast that they want to tell other people about it. Getting to leverage your audience's word of mouth. That is a form of promotion. Promotion doesn't mean you're the one going out there and telling people about the podcast. Promotion just means someone is telling someone about your podcast. Someone is promoting your podcast, and you can equip your audience to do that.
Yeah. That does seem like one more challenge to overcome. I mean, I'm just thinking of, well, the very current example, Ray, of that we didn't have a mechanism in place to tell everyone about the show, and that type of thing. It's like, yes, it was on the calendar, but if people didn't find out about it, then we're gonna have another challenge. And I know that a lot of show producers really struggle with this. That they think once they hit publish, that folks will just find them.
Yeah.
You build it and they will come, right, Dave?
Yeah, and I mean, this is where you've got great tools like click to tweet. That's a cool thing you can do in your show notes to make it easy for people to share. You've got Tweet Jukebox. You've got Meet Edgar. Buffer is a great app that I just love and adore. So I basically set mine up to put out a tweet once a day for the first week, and then after that, it goes into Tweet Jukebox where it comes out.
Are you a Twitter bomber, Dave?
No, but I'm
I'm
definitely more tweeting than I was 6 months ago. I'm trying to get a little more involved over there.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of automation, but the way you're doing it is a good way. And I've seen no one does this better, in my opinion, than Libsyn, and I think that's pretty much Elsie at that point. Because here's the beauty of what she does. They put out tweets that are relevant. The thing is, with an hour-long podcast or any podcast, lots of things happen, and you don't capture all those great nuggets in a title. But a lot of times people will, they'll pick out, like they'll listen based on title. But you miss a lot of great content that I certainly want. So even episodes I've listened to, I forget. I want to go back and hear that content. So Libsyn will say, they'll time mark it. It's 1750. Elsie will tweet out, it's from the Libsyn account, so follow that. Mm-hmm. It's good even if you're not on Libsyn, by the way. Which this show is. She'll tweet out that, iTunes album art spec work at 1730. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I wanted to jot that down and go back. So it gets someone who's even listened to the content to listen again, right? So it can get people who didn't listen the first time or who already listened to listen deeper or to listen once. So, that is work though. I mean, that's a lot of work, I think, is to pull out those gems, even in timestamp them, or even just to schedule tweets is a lot of work. It's not something I do. I might tweet once or something, and it's not something I do. At work, we have such a huge Facebook fan page that it's worth the sweat because it's going to reach so many people. But a tweet from the same organization doesn't have as many followers, reaches less. But what's the importance of reaching one or two people, right? I mean, podcast listeners who are actually engaged tend to help you out, or they're deeply engaged, or what's the value of one listener? It's pretty good. So it just depends on what it's worth. But where's the major hurdle in promotion? Because you kind of mentioned, like, up front, we're now going to have to work a little harder, I think, to promote that the show's happening live. Live is also a weird animal, right? Because you want people to show up right then, but clearly the most people are going to consume this in the archive. That's different. But after you've produced, published, and you want people to let you know. Now, obviously, if you have guests like you do, you make sure you share it with the guest and you let them do a little promotion. And maybe in some cases you're picking people not just because they have a big following, but it may be part of why they ended up on your show either right now or 6 months from now.
I want to challenge something you said a moment ago that ties into this. Automation, I think we need to split automation into two sides. There's automating content and there's automating schedule. I think automating content, bad, horrible. That's like the stuff where...
What's an example? Yeah, what's an example?
So automating content would be you publish a post on your site and with your episode title, and then it automatically publishes to Twitter with the exact same text, maybe even with your website relevant extra text in there. So not tailoring
it for the platform. It's just sort of spreading it through every platform generically.
For example, to say you name your episodes poorly, and so your episodes are named episode 5. So then when you publish episode 5, a tweet automatically goes out that says episode 5 with the link. That's content automation, which I think is horrible. There are ways I think schedule automation is good. That's where Buffer, Hootsuite, Social Jukebox, or Edgar, or these kinds of tools allow you to you should be, I think, handwriting the content that goes out and write it in a compelling way. But then the schedule of that content can be automated. Like what I do with Social Jukebox, which is very similar to Edgar, but much cheaper. And actually, I think has better features. It's just not as pretty and easy to use as Edgar. But anyway, in Social Jukebox, I can have several jukeboxes or collections of content. And I've split them out where I have tweets about other podcasts on my network. I have questions. I have general podcasting tips. I have my past episodes. I have what I call monetized posts, which is I'm promoting something where I make money directly from it. And so I have these separate jukeboxes, and then I mix them together and schedule them so that like one monetized tweet goes out each day. One tweet about another podcast on the network goes out each day. One question goes out each day. And I see people click through on these things because it is reminding them of timeless content. And what's really fun, I like, is the questions that go out. Currently, they go out in the morning. And it's great to see around a particular time in the morning, I get a bunch of tweet replies. People are responding to that question that I scheduled to go out automatically. But that starts a conversation. I'm not blasting automated content. I'm automating the schedule for compelling content.
Yeah. And I would say if the real key is to just get Stargate Pioneer to follow your show because he'll clamor it. I mean, he clamors. I mentioned it before, but he makes a clamor. Like this feels like high threshold engagement. Like to make a clamor, it was harder. It's easier now. I still don't even probably know how to do it. There's a couple times I wish I was like, ooh, I want to do that. And it's not in the app or whatever. But a clamor is like a small snippet of a show and he'll pick out some nuggets and tweet it. So, that extremely thankful for that. That's very cool. But yeah, getting that, it's, I'm not going to ask someone to do that. But, Dave, what do you talk when it comes to social media or when it comes to promotion after the episode? What are you doing for that?
Well,
you tweet, but
yeah, I tweet. I mean, I have Libsyn publish it on Facebook and LinkedIn for me. But the big thing is, I think
that's kind of a good point. Just interrupt. That's what we do here in the roundtable.
That's what we do.
You get paid enough to be interrupted. Yeah, automation that way. Like Libsyn can send it to different places, and I'm actually experimenting with that. If you guys don't know, we're deep enough in that anyone still listening doesn't care if we sidetrack. Facebook once again pulled away the automated inline native player that you used to get when you put a link to like an MP3 file from a Libsyn. Yeah. Does not work anymore because they are deprecating Flash and they don't care about audio. So now you do this thing where if you're on Libsyn, it uploads a video as a video, which is native content, which Facebook likes more, but then it puts a video player. And at that point, Facebook is essentially hosting your audio. The cool thing is you should be able to see a stat where people actually stop listening to your show, which is a depressing stat. So don't get discouraged by that, or can be. But I don't even know what my point was other than that. While these can, I think in line with Daniel saying automation of content, I'm not exactly sure I like the integration right now. So there are tools like that, even maybe with your host, and maybe one reason to get a good host is that they can post to, with Libsyn, again, you can reach out to across a bunch of distribution when you post your episode. That can take a lot of work off of the going to every platform and doing that.
Well, and make sure your promotion is smart. I'll give you an example. I went to the mailbox today, and I get this little itty bitty pamphlet about once or twice a month of nothing but coupons, and it's for things like carpeting, roofing, windows, all this home, water heaters, air conditioning, all this stuff. I live in an apartment. I'm not going to use, and I just think whoever is spending money to mail this to me is just, and every mailbox here has one of those things. And I'm like, somebody needs to think about this because nobody in this apartment complex is going to put carpeting, windows, roofing. This is stuff that's taken care of by our association or whatever, our landlords. And I'm like, that's not really good marketing. Because now on one hand, if one of my friends who has a house goes, yeah, we need a new carpeting, I'll go, oh, well, you need to call A to Z Carpeting because I've seen their ad 20 million times now. But to me, it's like you have to be careful about just blasting it to everybody and things like that. The best way to promote is if you can get in front of your audience. And I mean, that's one of the things I'm excited about going to Philadelphia this weekend is I get to get face to face with people who are potential listeners. And then from there, it's the social media and then newsletters and things of that nature. But if you can, get in front of your audience.
So do you find that, I mean, I guess what we're talking about is the kind of announcing that you have a new episode, and I do that, but I also participate when on days that I don't have a new episode and I'm just talking to people. So do you find that it is either disingenuous or it's just part of the game to announce to places where you don't necessarily also participate?
What would be an example of that? Like, for me, it'd be like LinkedIn.
Yeah,
probably
like
not going back
if
to
you never
LinkedIn.
comment or even like on LinkedIn, but then you're like, here's my article, here's my episode.
Personally, I always, when I talk about all these, there's 50 million places to go. Like, I want people to go where they actually interact, right? So, if, you're trying to force your stuff to LinkedIn because there's a lot of people there, well, then I hope you're spending time there, because I like to spend my time on Twitter, and it may not be the most effective, but I will have conversations on Twitter. It'll happen. So for me, my own workflow, I probably do the most promotion where I spend the most amount of my time because it works for me. So, I mean, I guess that's sort of a,